Avivi, good morning.
Good morning, Benjamin.
Thank you very much for being with me today and for sitting to interview. I'm looking forward to bringing a little bit about your personal background and some of the initiatives on which we're working to the attention of the listener and of the viewer. And what I'd like to do is begin with a little bit about your personal background so that people can have the pleasure of getting to know you, as I have gotten to know you, quite frankly, because it's a unique story. So first of all, let's begin with where were you born, where were you raised, and why were you raised in those places?
Okay, I was born in Jerusalem. My father's family has lived in Jerusalem for 15 generations. Mm-hmm. My mother's family survived the Holocaust and on the eve of Israel's independence immigrated to Israel from Bulgaria. My father has worked for years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He was Israel's ambassador in Turkey, in Chile, and in Colombia. So I got to spend most of my youth outside of Israel. From the first 18 years of my life, 15 years were spent abroad.
So the first 15 years of your life was spent abroad, and where specifically was that period spent?
Well, immediately after I was born, my parents arrived to Italy. So my first year I spent 2.5 years actually I spent in Rome. Mm-hmm. Then we moved to Africa, to Ivory Coast, for another 2.5 years. I returned for a short period of time to Israel, and then once again we moved, this time to South America. Mm-hmm. I arrived at the age of 7 to Chile at the time of Pinochet, mm-hmm. Quite a harsh time for Absolutely. The country. Absolutely. I was educated there in an American school for 2 years, and from there we moved to Argentina.
So throughout this journey or this odyssey, how many languages did you manage to pick up? How many do you speak today?
Well, at the age of 5, I spoke 3 languages, Italian, French, and Hebrew.
Incredible. Then
I arrived to Chile, a Spanish-speaking country, in an American school. Mm-hmm. So these 3 languages didn't help me at all. Right. I learned 2 new languages. So by the age of 7, I spoke 5 languages.
So you're moving around from country to country as the son of a diplomat, quite a very esteemed diplomat, actually, as I understand it. I've had the pleasure of getting to know him somewhat as you've introduced him to our work and to our initiatives. And I am somebody who moved to the States of Israel and enlisted as what's called a Chayal Boded, a lone soldier. Now, a lone soldier is oftentimes thought of as being somebody who doesn't have Israeli parentage, but that's not the case. You are a lone soldier yourself. Tell me how it was that you made the decision to enlist, and then we'll go on to perhaps how you built such an illustrious career there.
Well, as an Israeli, it was obvious that I would go back to Israel and enlist. At the age of 15, I arrived to Rome once again. There I was educated in a British school, and my friend in school used to ask me, "How long will you serve in the army?" My straight answer was 4 years. I knew from the beginning that I'm going to be an officer in the army, and that at the age of 18 I will go back to Israel and enlist.
And you wanted to be an officer. Was that because with your background and being conversant in so many languages, were you determined to be a combat officer, or did you think that you might go into the foreign relations branch of the I.D.F? What was open to you and what were you passionate about?
Well, at high school, I dealt with 2 main things. I composed classical music, I sang in a choir, and I played the piano. This is a big part of my life, and I thought at the time that I will be a professional musician. At the same time, I was also a house captain in the British high school.
Now let's just stop there, because I grew up in the United Kingdom, and it's no small thing for a Jewish boy, let alone an Israeli Jewish boy, to become a house captain. So you must have been quite an exceptional character within the high school environment.
I think that at the time I didn't really realize how big deal it was. I arrived at the age of 15 to this British high school, St. George's English School in Rome. At the age of 16, 1 year later, I was a vice house captain. Mm-hmm. And then a year later, in my last year of school, I was asked to be the house captain. By the way, my house won all the tournaments throughout the year in these 2 years.
Excellent.
So I experienced leadership at a young age, but I was also deeply engrossed in music. And when I came back to Israel, I had to decide which way to go, music or leadership. And once I joined the combat engineers, it was clear to me that it's going to be leadership.
And so you joined the Israel Defense Forces, your parents are living outside of the country, and you begin this career in the Israel Defense Forces, as you said, in the combat engineers. And then tell me about some of the positions that you've held within the I.D.F.
Well, as you know, in the I.D.F, everybody starts as a simple soldier. So did I. My first year was quite difficult for me.
Why was that?
Well, first of all, as you said, I was a lone soldier. My parents still were in Rome. At the time, they came back only a year later. It also was a cultural shock coming from a diplomatic background to real Israeli harsh life.
Right.
It was a complete shock to me. It took me time to adjust, to understand the language again. You know, things change very fast in Israel. And to meet the whole Israeli society. I didn't know it as well as I know now.
And you're there, the 4 years come and go. What makes you take the decision to spend more time in the military? Was there a specific event? Was there a specific set of opportunities? What did it come down to?
Well, when I became an officer, I was honored to receive command of a platoon of 30 soldiers. And it was the most amazing and special year of my life, leading soldiers in a battlefield and in training. It felt to me like the most important thing I've ever done. And I felt I was good at it, and I can do even more.
And so your career progresses from there. Tell us about some of the positions that you held along the way to becoming a brigadier general.
Well, I was a platoon commander, a company commander. I commanded 3 different companies. Later on, I was a battalion commander. I commanded a battalion of combat engineers of over 800 soldiers. Quite a difficult period of time. I started my command in 2002. Very difficult and complex time. Throughout the 2 years, between 2002 and 2004, we operated mainly in Judea and Samaria and also on the northern border.
Can you just give the listeners a little bit of context about what was going on at that time?
Well, in April 2004, Israel started operation, it's called in English?
Defensive Shield.
Okay. So in 2004, Israel started Operation Defensive Shield, and exactly at the beginning of this operation, I got the command of the Combat Engineers Battalion. So I commanded the battalion in this operation, and it took more than 2 or 3 years after the operation to manage and control the burst of terror that we saw at the time. We conducted for every night operations in different cities in Judea and Samaria, apprehending suicide bombers. And only in 2004, 2005, we managed to bring back the situation to be a normal situation in Israel.